I gotta,
Do it. Let's do a mental warm.
yeah.
All right.
All right. So, good morning and welcome to our 15th, my gosh, 15 um, coalition meetings. We've been at this a while, and we're only, I think, after this one, we have two more, and we're officially done. This morning, our warm up is, and again, it's not, I think originally we made these mandatory, but if you have something that comes to mind, what is there anything that you learned at some point, a skill or something you learned earlier that you were grateful for learning earlier in your life? I can start. I learned how to scuba dive when I was like 19. I grew up in St. Louis, which obviously isn't like a scuba diving mecca, but started out, my parents made me go to a community college because they weren't sure I was college material. And so at a community college in St. Louis, they had a scuba diving, a PADI, which is kind of your mainstream scuba diving certification. Was able to get like my basic, advanced certifications when I was like 19, and you never have to like get recertified. So it's been great my entire life. I've been able to like anytime we're someplace where I can scuba dive, I can, which is really nice. It's been a great skill that I think was a good thing to learn at that time, and it was pretty cheap at a community college. So that was something I was grateful for.
Tom, do you think that led you to not giving you all the time to think of your examples, but do you think that might have led you to think, jumping out of an airplane was because I see them similarly, I wouldn't do either, by the way. I'm just saying that.
Well, the truth is, when I was like 19, I had this list of things, scuba diving and not parasailing I've done, but what's the thing in a para, like a glider? I mean, I had all this crap that I thought I'd wanted to do before I died, and definitely scuba diving, jumping out of a plane were the two I accomplished, and realized most everything I thought I wanted to do, I'm too terrified to try. So, but that's interesting that you put those together because when I was like probably 19, 20, I actually had a list like that.
I'm not surprised. All right, I'm sorry. Turn it back over to other people to share theirs. Yeah.
Yeah, just optional. Anybody learn anything that they're really glad they learned?
I'm really glad
Ooh,
that I learned how to speak. Oh, go ahead, Kimberly.
Okay, no, sorry. It's probably generic, but it's true for me, which is teamwork. So just like playing sports early on in my life, I grew up playing volleyball, and I literally have to use this skill every day. Like on my job, with my family, with my coworkers, like when we're doing special projects, like it really has been an invaluable skill, and I'm so glad that I learned and continue to learn and grow in throughout my lifetime.
awesome. That's good. Jillian, you were trying to
Yeah,
get
I
in
was
there
going to
too.
say that I am really, really glad that in school and then through travel, I learned how to speak Spanish.
Mm.
That continues to pay off every so often.
Are you fluent? I mean, are you able to?
Well, I was at one point, and now I can get around pretty good, but yeah, it helps at work sometimes.
Hmm.
It helps when we're having work done on our house a lot. It helps,
Hmm.
in all sorts of different situations. So, yeah.
I took French, which was totally useless. Good. Teamwork. Spanish.
Kimberly, I'm glad that you kind of um framed yours the way you did because I was thinking it was like, oh yeah, that's why it's important for kids to have access to, team sports and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? That's why I'm glad that I was at a school that had a really strong choral music program and that I did a lot of I learned a lot about like public speaking and being in front of big groups of people through choir and musical theater and speech and debate. So yeah, I guess I did learn something that helps me now back then.
Kristen, you had one?
Yeah, I would say my mother taught me to cook, but also to be an adventurous eater.
Hmm.
And I think I've learned a lot about the world by just being willing to sit down and try what other people are eating, even though like didn't always think it was going to be a good idea, but I like that it kind of gives you a sense of adventurousness.
I was a competitive dancer when I was in high school. And so some of that teamwork stuff for sure, but like my parents were very hands off. So I did a lot of traveling on my own, or I, jumped in someone else's car. And I think that helped me along the way kind of learn to navigate like strange places and having to interact with people, being independent, and also just like physically like the muscle memory. I do not dance anymore, but there's times when I do yoga and I'm like, oh yeah, my body still knows how to do those things. So lots of benefits.
Anybody else?
Mine is a little corny, probably, but I've shared this with just friends over throughout my life. But I learned people. I come from New Jersey, and a very diverse state. A lot of people from different countries, different nationalities, different cultures, and we're all in one place. So as a young kid, I feel like I was exposed to so many different ways that nothing ever felt strange or and it helped me to be able to, I think today it helps me to be able to understand where people come from, why people do the things that they do, different because of the exposure to different cultures and stuff. And I think it gives me a leg up sometimes when I'm developing relationships and leveraging relationships to do different things. So I know it sounds a little off, but I think it was a great thing, even though it was a people skill that was, you can't sit down. I guess you can sit down and talk about things, but just that exposure. So even within my neighborhood, I was in so many different countries at one time, and it actually fostered this love of people. And so I've traveled to, I think probably, I mean, most of our continents except for the cold one, and in different countries, and I just love it. I just love people. So I think it helps me.
Yeah, beautiful.
I would say the same thing for myself to piggyback Tina. We were in the 80s, the Black Brady Bunch. So with that said, my stepdad had 6 kids and my mother had 3 of us. So
Wow.
by the time I was 4, we were married and we were like between having the small of my sisters and the large group. And then, of course, you get older and then everyone marries. And so having the UN as a part of our family dynamics helped then shape who I am today. So you will hear me say, like y'all have heard me say many times of just kind of like, let's just do it. Like, let's just do it. Because I think my experience, whether it's like with the family, playing on sports, being in debate, like all of those things, like all of those experiences, if anything, have helped me to realize people are people, one. And in general, respect goes a long way, listening goes a long way. And that uncomfortableness, I'm actually excited for, like getting ready to jump off the plane, because I think that is the beautiful part for me is the birthing of something new, that negotiation that happens when people get nervous of like, I brought my family and my ideologies, you got your family, your ideologies, and together we have to negotiate what stays, what goes, and then something is created, and something literally is birthed. That part is jam. I'm like, oh, what's gonna stay, what's gonna go, and then what are we compromising? What are we creating together? So all of those things are very exciting for me, which is why y'all hear me like, let's do it, because I see it as a strength of birthing something that hasn't been.
This was fun. This was good. All right.
Yeah,
If there's nobody else, we could, Adam, do you have anything?
Yeah, I wanted to offer learning to type was, I mean, I just think over the years, the dividends that's paid off. But I wanted to ask this too. I was getting all philosophical and wondering, of all the things you've learned that's helped you succeed today, have any been more foundational to you than learning to read? All right. Any response to that? Was that just like a mic drop, or was that just irrelevant? All right. Did it sound better in my head than it did, like playing out on television?
No, Adam, when you put it like that, I wouldn't have been able to start participating in choral music, because like that was one of the kind of in my church choir at St. Robert Bellarmine in Blue Springs, Missouri. You had to, if you wanted to sing in the children's chorus, you had to be able to read the music. So that you make an excellent point there.
I think for myself, like I can't tell you, and I've even asked my mother this before, like I don't remember learning to read, mostly because I just told you, Black Brady Bunch. I have 4 older brothers. And so what I did know is I was the first girl out of all of them. And so they're not going to do anything better than I can. So I don't know where I picked it up or if I made them sit down, but I don't recall any of that other than feeling like I already feel like I'm behind because I can't be on the same level as my 4 older brothers, right? And so something in that was the catalyst of I'm going to learn this, though I don't know how I learned it.
I'm thinking about reading about Helen Keller learning to read. If you haven't ever read that passage from her autobiography, somebody else going to speak? I might have spoke over. All right, very good. Well, Tom, that got our minds warmed up. So that was a good warm up. Perfect. Let's get into the POM of it all. I just want to say, I don't know, I had this thought earlier this morning, so I wanted to say to you that POM is happening all the time. I mean, it's not like just a thing that it's whatever you did or have done since we last met. Every activity, every meeting had a purpose. It had outcomes, whether or not you reached it or not. And then there were methods. And maybe people talked about purpose and outcomes, but I doubt it. I think people just, jump right into methods. And so I just wanted to say, I don't know, it's always in play. So for our meeting, for our segment of time today, we wanted to offer this as a focus. Remember, purpose is, the way I define it at least, is it's our focus and why it matters. So feel free to, now if this is off, then everything that follows is off, right? So you tell me, today, our focus could be important discussions and useful data with 3 weeks left, which is tying up loose threads from last time around programming and when we met last time, and how the coalition plans to move forward, say, after March 25th. So the next week, April 1st, which Tom pointed out to me in April this morning, what would happen? So anyway, first things first, is this the right focus, or would you say it differently, or would you look at something else? And if it is the right focus, then why does it matter?
Because time is running out.
I'm gonna say maintain momentum, if that works for you all. That's another thing. Anything else? Any other reasons why this matters?
I think it matters because now the ball's kind of being tossed back to us. And so we have an opportunity to kind of take charge and lead our own selves versus being led or guided um, with by you all. And so this is an opportunity for us to really show ourselves that we are committed and that we can continue to move forward in the way in which we desire.
Let me know if that captures it well enough.
Yeah, and I guess I think it does, but I think I spent a lot of time this past week tunneling into the outcomes, and I mean, ultimately, the outcomes are gonna be the measure of the success of the coalition. So, it's everything. So, I mean, that's why it matters.
I know I probably didn't capture it quite right. I hope I got the gist of it there. Okay, then if that's our focus and why, and plenty of reasons why it matters, what outcomes by the end of our time today, 12:30 Central Time, by that, what outcomes would we want to have happen? What do we want to walk away with?
Well, I mean, I'll say what I hope we can walk away with is the coalition processes, the indicators that I've drafted, so we get some feedback and get a good understanding of what success looks like long term.
Great. Good. Other outcomes from today.
I would say at least some clear first steps around what happens after March 25th. I think that's the date. Is that the date?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I look, the first Monday after our last meeting with us is April 1st, so that's kind of interesting. It's the next Monday, so.
You guys know about Dagen H in Sweden, September 3rd, 1967. Sweden had switched on that day. You know, we did daylight savings time switch, so that was all, you know, the chaos that causes, but they switched the sides of the road people drove on that day. Yeah, and do you know how many accidents occurred on the next? 0. It was so well executed. Yeah, it's worth looking up. I was just Googling it to make sure I had the right country because I always forget which country it was. Yeah, and anyway, that just, you know, what would allow us to have that smooth of a handover? You see, I don't know, for those that were like, where's he going with that? All right, other outcomes. That was also meant to kind of get you thinking, give you time to think of any other outcomes you want for this meeting today. Any loose threads to tie up?
Some agreement. I'm guessing because you keep highlighting this word, you'd like us to talk about some agreement around where programming sits.
I don't know. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. Just greater clarity about where, did you say programming? Is that the word? Okay. Programming fits. Yeah. All right, I'll leave it there. And if anybody thinks of any other outcomes, we can come back. It's just important. It's kind of a way to go, all right, hey, are we here for the same reason? Are we going in the same direction? Are we going to be pulling in the same direction? And then now we can say, all right, do our methods, which of course we do ahead of time. So, you know, it's a little, it is a little bit about like a little out of order, but we can edit them. But will these methods lead us to those outcomes? In other words, will these methods lead us to time well spent? So where we're going to go next, we're a few minutes behind, but we're going to just talk about the survey results from what, you know, just kind of getting a sense of how coalition members want to be participating going forward. So we'll talk through that, what we learned. Then we're gonna have a conversation about methods. Oh, awesome. Okay, programming will be, I type really fast. See, that you didn't see me type it there because that took keyboarding. It was like one of those skills I learned early on, which also, Lauren, is dependent on having, you know, I couldn't keyboard if I didn't know how to read, right? Kind of like choir and it would be, all right. Then we have a little well-earned break. And then we come back to develop you know, our SMART outcomes and indicators. So we'll be looking at what's useful data. We'll be looking at some SMART outcomes and KPIs, key performance indicators. I don't know why I said it that way. We're going to go into breakout groups and then have you all come back, share what you discussed. We'll have you all break out into groups to look at each of the 3 main outcome headings and what, you know, what indicators and KPIs look like for that. All right. So do you think that that's a good agenda? Will that get us to where we want to go? Excellent. Then with that, let's go into discussion of participation and the survey results. April, do you want to take us that direction?
Yeah, so thank you guys for filling out the survey. I think we got a pretty good response rate. There are a couple of you, I think, that weren't able to get in your responses in time. But I did post that to Basecamp, so you're very much encouraged, since we don't really have a lot of time to do a really in-depth read today, you're very much encouraged to go through and read the perspectives of your, you know, fellow coalition members, understand what people are grappling with. I think there's some important, you know, detail in there in terms of you know, what people's hesitations are, you know, sensitive issues that the coalition can continue to explore as you move forward, but also what each other's strengths are and what you're excited about and what you want to bring to, you know, this initiative. And so we did get, there's a couple of things I want to draw our attention to for the purposes of this discussion. First, you know, I think I would love to just get reactions, you know, in filling out that survey. You know, was it hard to put pen to paper, you know, as you're thinking in terms of what's coming next and you're thinking through what you and your organization are able to give to this? You know, I'd love just kind of some reactions to that and maybe anything that you are grappling with or your organization is grappling with that we can, you know, discuss as a group. And then the other part of the conversation really is, you know, we're going to be moving into, you know, who does what by when. We're going to be moving into the handoff. And so it really is time for us to have that conversation about, you know, what does the leadership for the coalition look like, at least in the immediate term after March 25th? Like, who's going to be facilitating that next meeting? You know, I know we've talked about rotational leadership as a potential opportunity to kind of spread that around, but essentially identifying, you know, who has the bandwidth, who wants to do it, and how we're going to organize that, at least to get things off the ground and keep it moving, you know, in the immediate term. And I will share, I think it was helpful just to get like this little calendar essentially of responses in terms of what is everyone's availability. So it looks like, you know, we had 7 people say that they were available in the short term, 7 people in the medium term, and 10 people in the long term. And it looks like maybe there was a little bit less availability of organizations in the short term versus people in the short term. So I'd like to really dig into this and, you know, understand what it means in terms of who has bandwidth to move this forward. But, you know, essentially, a potential takeaway is, you know, we have a critical mass of folks in the short term that have bandwidth for this and are interested in being, you know, involved in the short term. So I think that's a good data point for us to know as we're starting to think about what does, leadership look like in the next couple of months? So that's my quick, overview. But first, we'll just start with reactions to the survey in general. What was your experience like filling this out? Did anybody struggle with it? If so, around what? This is a good time to just talk through anything on your mind in terms of, commitment, personal or organizational commitment moving forward.
I think it's probably important to, sorry, Kimberly.
Sorry, Jenny. No, I keep having this weird timing today. I was just gonna start by saying, like, I filled it out. However, like, a lot of whatever I'm available to do is going to be dependent on my organization. So I gave y'all the best of what I think I can do. So it's just there. But the lead is determining on, like, whatever our organization is saying I have time to do and the role that I play going forward, if that makes sense. So
for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's probably important to talk about the what would limit our organizations and how to talk about this to our board. And so I think these next, few weeks or, right after in April, if we need to figure out what this is and how to phrase it and how to talk about, funding and what our role is in this organization.
Anybody else?
I really tried to answer the best I could for myself. But of course, like I'm not the last call when it comes to speaking for Turn the Page KC as an organization. And for that, I defer to my executive director.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure if I'm responding to what I was thinking and filling it out or what I was thinking and seeing how others filled it out. But I do think that momentum is critical, and it concerned me a bit that there are some gaps in the spring and summer. And I understand it, but things change a lot in 2 months. People's mindset and connection and awareness change a lot. And I hope that people can get over the next few weeks the sense that they need about what we're envisioning, so that it can continue really smoothly. But based on what I saw about Turn the Page individual responses, like, we're all in, all three of us, and that's all we are. We're three. So that's kind of my reaction.
I can add that I filled it out this morning because I still am sick. So sorry, I feel like I was late. But my overall thinking is that I'm in to help with whatever. But as a library, we're in a very big season of change. We have a director that started with us about a year ago, and I just got a new position, which is wonderful, but there's a lot that needs to happen on our end before we're settled in that way, where I can provide a strong leadership role. So I'm trying my best to not bite off more than I can chew, and that is not my strength. So I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic towards the things that I get excited about. And this is one of the things I am most excited about. I think it is one of the places where I can have the most impact, and that the library as a partner can have the most impact. So I don't want to lose sight of that. So I'm saying I'm all in, But what the reality is, I'm probably not going to be able to facilitate a meeting in the next couple of weeks where I'm the person putting it all together. That's not realistic for my workload, but I can show up and be ready and be thoughtful and be prepared. So anyway, I just want to let you know, like, as far as I know, Mid-Continent Public Library is 100% on board with this. And they're still supportive of my time being spent this way, but we're in like baby startup mode, which, as you all know, is just like exhausting. You are running when you're trying to rebuild the whole thing. And so that's where we are, even though we're a very well-established library. My neck of the woods is being reworked. So it's just kind of the reality of the season I'm in. But I do think once things get settled, I will be able to take a stronger leadership. But I don't want to be on the back burner or do any of that. I would like to continue the momentum that we have.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, we all really appreciate that.
I think too, just jumping on what Katie said, like for myself, I'm obviously committed. It's tricky being part of a public library system, and I think, you know, we've been pretty clear about that from the start, that financially, like, we're just, you know, we are also in a moment of change. We have are searching for a new executive director. There's a lot of that happening, but just in general, the library being able to commit to any financial piece of this is, I don't see that happening. That does not mean that we cannot commit to providing spaces and providing, you know, we want to continue to have a seat at this table. And I think that I made that clear in you know, what I wrote, but I do think it's tricky because, you know, I don't know what the library partnership looks like other than being able to really, you know, just offer the resources that we already have. So.
Yeah, we're also kind of in a time of change, which is actually making this kind of a perfect opportunity for us. Normally, we're pretty like strict about what we can do since we're AmeriCorps programs, but we might have some more flexibility moving forward. So yeah, we're in it. And I think as a national organization that has a lot of resources, we're happy to contribute those as well, because we have like a marketing team and lobbyists and things like that. So I'm excited to bring that into the group.
I think Linda and I have talked about this, and as you know, we're going through transition right now. We're looking for executive director. Our board has questioned what Linda and I are doing with the coalition, and I think right now we're just kind of in a limbo part right now. I feel like we need this in Kansas City, what we're doing. I feel like there is a need, and everyone that is on this has such a great voice that I think we can use our voice and we can continue this. I would like for us to come up with something that we could go to our board and say, this is what we're doing. Right now, I feel like we can say it, but just to be comprehensive in what we present to them would be very helpful. And I don't know if maybe other people are thinking this too, but to say, this is where we are, this is where we plan to go, and this is what we plan to do for Kansas City. And we don't want to be left out. We want to be a part of this because we have such a great voice. So I just think there's a lot of uncertainty on our part right now with Lead to Read, but I know that I'd like to continue, but I would like to have something, a little help in going to the board and saying, this is what we are doing.
What are the questions they're asking? Because that could be helpful in knowing what other boards might want to know too.
They haven't really asked us specific questions, so we haven't got to that yet. So I'm hoping that they're just saying, why are you doing this? I mean, like, you know, why are you spending the time on doing this? And so we're saying, because we believe in the literacy in Kansas City, there's a need, and that this group can be powerful in spreading the word about literacy and helping everyone in Kansas City. So, I mean, we're just really general about it right now, but I don't think until we get our executive director that we would know exactly how to present that.
I see some other heads nodding as you're talking, Bev, and I know that everybody has conversations with boards. So do you feel that the final draft of the purpose and outcomes and methods will paint that picture for you? Will that be the concrete piece that can guide that conversation, or are you looking for something to go with that, or something of a different form?
I think that would be very helpful. I just think it's almost like we need a little elevator speech, if that makes sense. Something that just, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is where we're going with it. You know, just something pretty concise. I don't know that they need to get into the nitty gritty, but I just think something that we all believe in, and this is where we're going, if that makes sense.
So, couple of things. I love the survey. It was direct, it was concise, it was easy to navigate, all the things. I know that I'm in a unique situation in that Dreams KC is Katina. But what you all don't know is I've also onboarded board members throughout this process, but that also made it easy for me in such a way that I was able to explain what I've been doing, what I'm currently doing, and bring them along with me in these conversations. So I'm full in. But I do have some limitations because I am a small organization, right? And so I put that in the survey, is that capacity is going to be significant for me, be that financial or human capital, my time. So I'm very clear about that, but I'm also very clear that I know I have learned how to say no when I need to say no, and yes when I need to say yes, and make sure that those yeses and nos align. Throughout this conversation, in terms of board conversations, I think we are the champions that we're looking for, and we have to really be confident in the work that we've done thus far and what we potentially can accomplish moving forward. And I think we've done the work with these consultants to actually go to our board and say, hey, we have purpose, we have outcomes, like basically what Kristen just said. And if that needs to be put in a narrative format, if we need to create an elevator pitch from that, I think that's easy. But we have to speak with the confidence and bring our board along, not necessarily wait for permission, right? Because we understand that in the current environment that is Kansas City as it relates to literacy, there are redundancies, there are gaps, there are ways across the lifespan in terms of literacy where we missed the mark. And so this organization came together to eliminate that, to do away with that, to close those gaps, to get rid of those redundancies, and act more robust and innovative in an effort to make Kansas City a literate city. Like that's the spiel, right? That's the pitch. And so I want us, I hope that we all have the courage, the confidence to like speak in that way, like knowing that like this is the work and we're about it, like, you know? And so after our meeting last week, I that was the thing too, that just kept like resonating with me, like we need more courage, we need more confidence, like let's go for it. Why not? We are the organization, the coalition that can move mountains. I believe that. I'm crazy enough to believe that, and change the entire trajectory of our city in the outlying areas. And then in terms of funding, I think we just have to think more innovative about funding in terms of our organizations. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to write a check. If they are already struggling with funding, or they have certain tax things going on where they get their funding, such as the libraries and things like that. But maybe we go after specific funding to support this work on behalf of our organizations, right? Or we host that fundraiser, or we do whatever that's going to ensure we have the funding as the coalition. So again, I just think we need to think a bit more innovatively around how we fund this work, how we can sustain the funding of this work, diversify the funding of this work, but don't just necessarily think about it in terms of your particular organization writing a check. Dreams don't have a check to write, but Dreams gonna, go and kick ass at trying to find some funding to support this, right? And so, I just think, I don't know, let's get on a higher plane. Like, yes, let's get on a higher plane. Let's get excited, you guys. And I know it might be easy for Katina to say, or, you all may think, yeah, Katina, you got all that bureaucracy or red tape. Yeah, but it's just me. I'm one, and I got a lot more other things going on. So, yeah, I'm sorry it took so much time, but I want us to get excited, y'all. We can do it.
I love that, Katina, and I appreciate that you just specifically spoke to the issue of funding, because I hear everyone's concern, and I've never actually conceptualized what we're about to jump into as something that our organizations are putting money into, other than our time. I mean, obviously, they're paying for our time, and that's going to go into it. But I think that, number one, in Kansas City, the time is right now. There is so much attention on literacy across every funder, and they want a collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing it through multiple sources. Funders want a collaborative, and it's us. And I think that we now have an opportunity that at least most of our organizations haven't had before, which is to bring money into Kansas City from outside funders. That hasn't happened much. And I think nothing will be more powerful to our local funders than to say, not only do we have clarity on how to fund literacy, but we aren't doing it alone. I've put aside a couple of grant opportunities that I think have potential from outside funders. I know there are others that you all are connected to. I just think the opportunity is huge, but it's right now. I just don't think that time is our friend on this one.
This is great. Let's keep it going, guys. I think this is a really productive discussion, really getting to the heart of, what it's going to take to jump out of the plane together, and why the time is now, and why the people are us. This is what it's all about. And I think what Kristen just said about funding is really a really good sign. I think that's something that we can run with. You guys definitely have your finger on the pulse in the way that, like, Tom, Adam, and I certainly don't. So what's possible in terms of fundraising, and also, to Katina's point, thinking outside of the box in terms of fundraising, and taking that ownership, not being afraid to step into that systems leader role that we can all play. All right. Well, go ahead, Adam. Yeah,
I've been sitting on a thought here, just in terms of, like, independent organizations, right? Like, how far back? Okay, so we're looking to have a coalition response to literacy, whereas before we had an independent organizational response to literacy, or the little aspects, our portions of the literacy issue, that our organization took on. So we recognized you all meeting, even before Tom, April, and I met you all meeting was a sign that you recognize the inadequacy of that approach for community-wide literacy. You all were going, hey, we need to do something. So that's leadership. That is the kind of, that leadership is what led to us doing this. Now, what I'm wondering is the degree to which that leadership needs to be directed within your organizations to say, hey, I know from a board member's perspective, your thing is, how do we as an organization survive, right? But this coalition, it's not asking that question. This question's asking, how could Kansas City survive? So if your board is putting the organization before the city, then it's not that they're bad or doing anything wrong. They're probably doing their, they're doing their job being a good board member, but But we need to kind of maybe look at a board of people. Well, let me pause there. Let me just kind of, because, yeah, any reactions to any of that? I can keep going, but I just, I jump a lot. So this might be a big jump. Because I'm thinking, what if you identified those of your board, one or two each, that were genuinely committed to a community-wide mission, a citywide focus for literacy, that maybe they would rather be on a board, without hurting the board of the independent organization, that we could actually build a board that's committed. Because otherwise we might have these independent boards kind of being like, well, I'd love to, lend our kindling to the bonfire, but we need it for ourselves, and then the community bonfire. Anyway, I'll stop there. Yeah.
No, I see what you mean. And, that's kind of like, I wonder where it's coming from is that, that if we start working as a collective and building a really big tent, that other individual boards will feel like our missions are competing, when really they're not. Or that the time spent on the mission of the coalition will detract from the mission of the individual organization, which is something that we have seen throughout history in movements of social change, where the people who are, like white suffragists were like, I'm sorry, but our, including Black women in this fight is going to detract from our focus. Or straight women's rights activists in the 60s and 70s referred to lesbians as the Lavender Menace, saying, well, if we include you guys in this discussion, it's going to knock us off track. So then I wonder, like, where is this coming from, the idea that maybe time spent with the coalition is a detraction from your work as an individual institution.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've made a lot of progress in this conversation, and I really, I don't think we're going to get to the answer today of what does our handoff team look like and that sort of thing. But I think, I really appreciate you guys, many of you speaking, sharing where you're at. I encourage you all to continue thinking about that. Next week, we're going to be sharing, hopefully, a draft of the action plan, and we're really going to start getting into like who's doing what by when. And really think about what you're able to take and pick up next month. Are we going to have bi-weekly, or are we going to have weekly sessions on Mondays? Are we, who's going to facilitate those meetings? Like we'll need to get into those specifics next week, but I think we made a good start today. In the interest of time, I think we'll move on to the methods discussion. Do you want to cue us up for that, Adam?
Okay. For me, it was just, I actually.
Okay, I got it. So basically, we just wanted to talk a little bit about essentially the programming question. I know that there was a lot of, actually really good discussion on Basecamp. So thank you guys for sharing that. I think that actually helped us kind of get to share thought bubble earlier. But I was wondering if a couple folks maybe who posted, or those who didn't, if we could just have some reactions. And just essentially, summarizing your thoughts that you posted on the discussion board.
I mean, I can just do a quick synopsis. I mean, I think what I heard was not to jump off with starting or creating new programming, but just to inventory current programming, understand what coalition members have now, and then to better collaborate among coalition members and kind of push that out to the community. And so that's what I saw and heard as far as a synopsis, just to kick it off.
Yeah, so the questions are really, how do you all see programming moving forward, and more immediately, how do you see it fitting into the strategic plan? Do we need to make any changes to the plan?
Essentially, would there be a fifth gear called programming? Or is it 4 gears and programming is distributed among those 4 gears? Or something else?
I don't think that based on just like the conversation that we were having this last week, it doesn't look like we feel like we need a 5th gear for programming. And that programming, right, as we're talking about our plans right now, is more of a tactic that would live under the gear of engagement and outreach. Does anybody else feel similarly or differently?
I think I agree with you, and I would add it might also be a tactic in the partnership gear, right? That's a different gear. Yeah. Because I think just as we all will, as we kind of share and get to understand what everybody's doing really effectively, we might be shifting the program we offer or partnering together and offering it or adapting it so it's a better alignment to what else is being done. But that can also be sort of a coordination effort we can provide to partners as the landscape of who this embodies grows.
Yeah, essentially sort of what I'm hearing is this, you're kind of focused on the upstream of how to, you know, bring all the different stakeholders to the same table and how to align the vision, how to build that shared thought bubble around the POM for them to then go and conquer in their own areas. And that in itself would provide kind of a coordinating function for programming. And then, you know, maybe thinking in terms of, you know, Adam and Tom and I have been thinking in terms of stages of development of the coalition. And so I like to use tree metaphors. So there's like the seed, you know, seed level, the sprout level, the sapling level, and like mature tree. And so what would the coalition look like as a mature tree? You know, maybe you could work up to you know, joint programming as you move through that ladder of like 1 to 7 in terms of your integration, for example. So maybe those could be like more ambitious, longer term goals. Again, idea of fashion show, but just kind of reflecting back like what I'm hearing.
I like that because it allows us time, and I think this came up in several people's responses, to really develop a shared community sense of what is working. I think the shared community awareness right now is all about what isn't happening, what isn't working. And I would be hesitant to center on programming before there's a sense of like, how do we even measure the effectiveness of program? Because that's kind of where we started in this conversation a year and a half ago, was like, we're all really successful because, you know, we get the grants and we show the outcomes, and that's not working. So a reset on what does it mean for it to be working?
That makes me think of I mean, I think that this is captured in the current gears and the current plan, but I feel like we haven't really put our finger on, you know, what are the tactics for creating a shared thought bubble for literacy best practices among literacy advocates. If you look at like literacy, the outcome, literacy advocates are all aligned and pulling in the same direction on, you know, these literacy best practices. Does that fit under program, or does that fit under partnerships gear? Does that fit under community outreach gear? I don't think we necessarily have really, you know, explicitly talked about how we're gonna, you know, operationalize that. And that also goes for the larger spectrum of partners that we're hoping to pull in. Like, what is our ask for them? You know, we bring them all to a table. We say that, you know, we want them to be aligned on best practices and a vision, but are we creating action plans for each of these stakeholders? You know, like, how does that actually, you know, operationalize? Again, I feel like those are areas that we all, I think we're on the same page, we're aligned on, but we haven't gotten very specific in terms of how it relates to the strategic plan and the gears and the tactics. So I'd welcome any reactions on that too.
I think Jatim and I talked about that when we were talking about partnerships and creating those, groups or those committees that would look into those very things, specifically, what does this look like? What are the roles and responsibilities? And so I think there might be a little bit in there with what we've worked on, the tactics.
Okay, so you think it fits under partnerships?
I think that's a good fit, because until we kind of do this, in my view, the piece you're talking about, this sort of what do we as the literacy focused people see as best practice? What are we promoting or supporting as best practice? That's the ask for partnership. It's within that vision that we welcome people to join in or to expand that view. So I see it as the first step in that partnership area.
Great, I love that. So essentially, we're creating I keep using shared thought bubble, but shared thought bubble on best practice for literacy in Kansas City, and the ask would be for them to become partners in their own way to implement that vision.
Well, and I think to Lauren's point earlier too, it then informs also marketing and communication and sort of how we're making this awareness.
Yeah,
I think that was Lauren's point earlier. If I misspoke, let me know.
Can I ask like a concrete example of what we're talking about or throw one out there and see if I am getting this? Because I think we're touching on a really key point that my brain has been struggling with to understand, like, how are we going to actually do any of this? So for me, one thing that I feel like I see a lot of us doing is attempting to put books in the hands of children, right? We talk about this all the time. We all have different ways of going about it because we understand that when children are in proximity to books, it makes a big difference in their life, their literacy, right? They have access to it, whether that's through the public library or they get free books through different programs. I know even some of our organizations are working together to create that. So if the idea is like, we want to have books in the home of every child in Kansas City, if that's like a vision or something. And again, I'm spitballing. And then these are all the efforts that all these organizations are doing to get to that end, right? Because people in our community are going to interact with all of us differently, or only a couple of us, or only one of us. And so, but we're all moving in that direction. Is that an example of what we're trying to talk about here and how we would operationalize that across the organizations? Because sometimes my brain just needs a really concrete example to understand what we're talking about. So if I'm completely off base, I would love to know that. So anyone have any reactions to that?
Yes. Yes. I think like the overall answer to your question is like, yes, that's something that we're attempting to operationalize. But I think that there would be some internal work of the coalition to evaluate, like, what types of books are we putting in the hands of children, given the fact that many of them can't read independently, or 85% of our kids are below grade level, and 75% of those kids have adults in their lives that are also struggling. So it doesn't matter if you put books in the home, are they going to actually be able to utilize them to meet the goal that we're setting, right? So I think yes, overarching, that's the goal. But then we have to do some work as a coalition to say, but how do we do this most effectively and think about all of the barriers and things like that to ensure that we're not giving millions of dollars of books that just become paperweights in the homes of the people that we're saying we want to impact, right? So there's external work to that, there's internal work to that, so that we can truly have a strategic and measurable way to getting those books out there and ensuring that they are actually accomplishing what we want to accomplish. But yes, I think, and I wrote down while we were kind of talking and I was listening, I was like, okay, so programming. I hear that community outreach and engagement may be a lever, but I think there's something more to that, because as this coalition, when we do community outreach and engagement, we're gonna be doing multiple things under there, not just programming, right? We're gonna be onboarding partners. We're gonna be looking for funding. We're gonna be educating the community. So like that type of community engagement and interaction looks very different from what you're talking about in terms of programming where we're actually doing something as individual organizations under the umbrella of this coalition, right? And so that's why I would advocate for it to be its separate flywheel, so to speak. And then I think there's going to be internal programming and things like that we do, and external programming that we do. And so that's, I think we have to be really, really careful not to just go, oh, we have this category, so we can just throw everything in there. And then we be so flustered and overwhelmed by that community engagement piece because we're trying to put too much under there. That is my thoughts.
I would add on to say, Katina and Katie, thank you for opening this up, because Katina, even before the points you're making, Katie specifically is talking about programs and like how we would do the operationalization of that. And then Katina, you're talking about, we got to look at larger pictures. So I would say my devil's advocate is talking about, oh, are we ready to do the work? Because what that looks like for me is that we're about to talk about community engagement, reading levels, funding opportunities. So I think our first quote unquote come to Jesus moment, excuse me, but my first thing that we need to talk through is the discrepancies of even our organizations. How are we all funded? Do we have the same measurements in which we are all held accountable to as we talk about literacy? And I'm gonna tell you right now, we don't. And so if all of those are already rubs that we have and we haven't even addressed that, that's why I asked the question a couple of weeks ago. Y'all ready for, like, are we ready? Because it's gonna be an internal for you personally, for your organization, and then the rubs is gonna happen as we all communicate. Adam tried to get us the last time, said, go ahead and let's just talk through this. But I think the hesitation came because we know there are some inequities and discriminatory practices between how we are viewed as literacy folks within our own city, especially as we walk toward becoming a lit city. It's going to be a lot of things we have to collectively, just us here, before we even invite people in, we got to put some stuff on the table and say, how do we, when we are in spaces together, when you're happy that your organization has gotten funding and you understand what your outputs are, you're like, if I got this, how is it the other one didn't get the same thing? And we did the same, because it's going to show. If we decide to do the same outreach, programming, curriculum, whatever we decide, it's going to highlight the discrepancies and equitability that each of our organizations have. And so are we ready to have those conversations? Because if we're not, then this will be in vain. Like, we have to open it all up so that we are very clear about the different levels in which we are in proximity to that which will sustain, support what we're trying to do collectively, and use it as a strategy. Maybe that means this organization is talking to funders, but bringing everything in. Maybe this organization knows how to do community outreach because you're understanding the demographics of people we're going for. Like, that's how I look at strategy, is like, but first we have to be clear, not only what our strengths and weaknesses are, you know, but who's able to continue to carry that baton to pass it off at what level. Like, that's where I come from when I'm listening to both Katie and Katina.
Agreed. I mean, that's real solidarity, right? That'll be the easiest and quickest way that we lose coalition members, is if we're not operating in solidarity, true, authentic, organic, genuine solidarity. I do think we're on our way though. And I think, you know, like moving in towards KPIs and things like that, like that's, I get so excited. I'm like, yes, about that, because then we can really begin to look at what are the deliverables, and we can build those out and fashion those. And once we sign on the dotted line to say, this is what this coalition is about, these are the key performance indicators, you know, we can measure any of our programming against these. And then that's going to help us be able to determine, is this something our individual organization should be doing or anyone else in this space, and we can just have it like this is what it is. And oftentimes that removes the feeling of being personally like attacked or anything like that. It's just like, hey, this is the black and white facts of the matter. Like, this is what it is. And yes, I know you love this program, or yes, I know you love this thing, but yeah, this ain't aligned to what we're trying to do to move our city forward. So, and if we're constantly framing it in that way, I think we'll be happy. We'll be moving forward. We'll be having successes. And we'll see the growth and evolution that we want to see. So yeah, and it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be uncomfortable. We gotta sit in some shit. Like, it just is what it is. But on the other side of that, we'll be so happy that we did.
All right. Well, guys, we do need to probably take a break, and we have a lot of outcome related conversation on the other side of the break. So thank you very much actually for queuing us up really well with that, Katina. In terms of what we're going to do in terms, like from the consultant point of view, we'll go ahead and take our first stab at developing an action plan for you all, integrating some of the points from our discussion today, as well as what's on Basecamp. I think from most of the consensus of what I'm hearing is we'll go ahead and kind of build out the programming piece in the existing gears, but then we can take a look at it next week and see, are we trying to fit too much into it? You know, you'll be able to really kind of see things and how they're laid out. And if we need to break it out into another gear, then we'll have an opportunity to do that. So I see some nods. If that sounds okay to everybody, then we will do that and have something to reflect back to you next time. Otherwise, I think we're good for a 5-minute break. All right, so I think we're, I know people are still kind of joining on. I see some cameras off, so if you're able to turn those on, please do. But we'll go ahead and get into our outcome discussion. And in general, you know, I think we wanted to just kick it off with, you know, Tom has some very specific things in terms of walking you through SMART outcomes. He's been doing some analysis, and so we'll be able to walk you through a process for that. But I think we first just wanted to like create a little space, you know, to revisit this idea of what is useful data for the coalition. I know, you know, particularly the data team has been working a lot on this topic. You know, I think, you know, from my perspective, it seems clear that there's really two areas that like where data really matters, or at least two that come to mind immediately. You know, one is measuring our progress, you know, as a coalition internally, like how are we measuring against, you know, whatever we want to measure against to, you know, say that we're reaching success. And then two is sort of the larger idea of capturing data for this vision of Kansas City as a literate city. And so kind of internal data tracking towards our, you know, outcomes essentially, and external data tracking towards this larger vision, which is also encompassed in our outcomes. But, you know, it's like that dual purpose. So yeah, I just wanted, before we get into like real specifics, I know you guys have been kind of thinking about this topic, and so I just wanted to create space in terms of like our guardrails, and when we're thinking about data, what really stands out to you as important for the coalition.
Mine is utilizing the systems that are already in place, because I don't want to like keep testing people for the sake of testing. So right now, I know a current barrier for me at Front Porch is working with Kansas City Public School District to actually get test scores in a timely manner to be able to do those analysis. So for me, it's like whatever on the back end we need to do to gather information that's already been gathered right now, sitting on someone's shelf that we don't, and then from there to be able to determine what's missing that we're doing, that's a part of that. But utilizing the systems that are already being incorporated and used.
Right. So not having to reinvent the wheel unless we have to, because as Tom will get into, you know, there are some areas maybe where we will need to create new data. You know, maybe nobody's asking questions quite like we are conceptualizing as data or as literacy across the city as we are. And so we're going to have to create new data indicators. But in some cases, There is data just off the shelf that we can pull. So being able to distinguish that is important. Totally agree.
To piggyback on that, Jatim, Head Start is what I'm looking for. Head Start and early Head Start.
So we need to figure out how to, if we don't already have between us a really good connection with the Department of Childhood, to really get on that potential connection.
Well, we'll have a lot more opportunity for more in-depth targeted conversation, but I just wanted to create that space. But yeah, Tom, do you want to take it away?
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to do a shout out to Katina for openly embracing the conversation about KPIs and data measurement and figuring out how we achieve our outcomes. So love you. I'm right there with you. So appreciate the enthusiasm. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and this document was sent to all of you this morning. Apologize for not having it sent sooner. But as I mentioned, been doing some detailed analysis of the outcomes that the coalition created earlier in the last few months. But first of all, just a quick, kind of level setting introductory piece here on SMART indicators and key performance indicators. First of all, probably everybody has come across SMART outcomes, but specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And then finally, or secondly, key performance indicators or KPIs are really how you benchmark, where we are now, and then setting kind of measures for where you want to be in the future. And one of the questions that we had as consultants was, as we think about where we are today, and then, are we setting out, and this isn't a question that we have to answer right now, but are we setting 3-year goals, 5-year goals? Because that's important, to be able to keep these time bound in terms of measuring things. And so I tend to do strategic planning in 3-year increments. I just think getting out 5 or more years, you just start to kind of lose perspective on the kinds of things that can happen. So KPIs, how we're going to measure specifically, what measures we're going to use to know whether or not the outcomes are achieved. And then SMART is, acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So what I did was I numbered we have 3 outcomes, and then some of the outcomes have sub outcomes. So I numbered them 1, 2, and 3, and then outcomes 2 and 3 have A, B, and C. So there's sub outcomes for them. You'll see here. And so I'll just quickly go through them. I think the plan is for today, and I know we're running behind at this point. So we're going to try to still do breakout groups, and maybe we should think about, 15-minute breakout groups, and then, 5-10 minutes at the end for report out for what you all think. So what I'm looking for is some feedback on how we're going to measure these things. And so first and foremost, I think we have some amazing outcomes, but I think some of them are really, really big. And, they're measurable, but it's like, okay, these are moving some pretty heavy mountains. And so the first one, I think, is probably the biggest, as a result of the vision of KC as a literate city, the community is thriving. And I think we specifically named improved public health, increased educational attainment, increased economic prosperity, decreased homelessness or houselessness. And so, certainly, if we quantified them as far as public health, education, economic prosperity, I mean, those are specific. They're pretty big areas, though. They certainly are measurable, but I think the first question about data, and I really appreciated Jatim just saying, we really need to use existing data sources. And I think, clearly our data sources already in existence that are capturing data in all of these areas. And I think it's really more of a question of which sources we want to rely on. Is it achievable? I mean, I think the question for me is, can the coalition impact houselessness? Can it impact educational achievement? Can it impact economic prosperity? I mean, I think it contributes to, but I think it's important to acknowledge the coalition isn't, literacy isn't totally going to change I think it's going to dramatically increase and help, but not alone. And so I think there's some limits to what the coalition can do. Certainly, it's totally relevant. I think we've said over and over again, literacy is, as you all know, I mean, it's, if you can't read, if you can't write, you're not going to be able to, there's really very few things that you're going to do well. Certainly time bound. Yeah, we can definitely put these into time bound frames. And so my sample or draft KPI would be again, 3-year increments by July 1st, 2027, X percentage of Kansas City citizens are thriving. So it's really just a question of how do we index that with improved public health, educational attainment, economic prosperity, decreased houseless population, et cetera. So the group that talks about this one, it's really probably a question of, is this even something, that you want to frame in terms of a 3-year goal? Are there sources of data that you trust in, that can capture these things? I mean, do we have to go to different places for the data? I think we've talked before about, when we talk about Kansas City, are we talking about a 9-county area, 6-county? I mean, we really need to kind of define and clearly say, when we talk about measurement, who is it we're measuring? So that's going to apply for all of them. So the second outcome that was created, all Kansas City citizens are informed of the importance of literacy at an individual and community level. And then the sub for 2A is KC citizens have access to high quality, accessible information about literacy in KC and are aware of the need and benefit of literacy at all developmental levels of life. Is it specific? It is. I mean, I think we need to talk about, access and awareness, and exactly what that means. Is it measurable? It is measurable. And this is one where I'm not familiar enough with the literacy space to know if there's already a survey that's measuring this. I doubt that there is, so there may need to be a customized survey that's built and sent to your constituents or other constituents that would be able to capture, the degree to which Kansas Cityans are, they feel like they have access and they're aware of literacy resources. Again, is achievable if, I mean, to me, I think it'd be expensive to do this. It may be easier if you all have access to researchers or ways of collecting data yourselves. Certainly it's relevant. And then finally, it can be time bound. So again, a sample 3-year key performance indicator for outcome 2A is by July 1st, 2027, X percentage of Kansas City residents are aware of and have access to information about literacy. B, kind of staying on this same frame within this outcome, 2B is our KC citizens are empowered as agents of literacy. Kansas City citizens feel a sense of empowerment with clear pathways to personally contribute to advancing literacy at an individual, family, and community level. Is it specific? Yes, but it does have 2 focus areas. One is kind of we have a sense of empowerment and we know there are clear pathways. Is it measurable? Yes, it is measurable, but just like outcome 2A, again, I don't know if there are existing sources of data that you can just tap into, or if that's got to be more of a customizable research collection plan. Is it achievable? Yes, it is, as long as that survey can be conducted. It's definitely relevant and it can be time bound. So a sample 3-year KPI for 2B is by July 1st, 2027, X percent of Kansas City residents feel a sense of empowerment and understand clear pathways they can take to contribute to advancing literacy at the individual, family, and community level. And then the final outcome within number 2 is KC citizens have access to holistic support across the lifespan. This one really focuses on diversity and accessibility within diverse communities, but at each developmental level of life, KC citizens of diverse backgrounds, identities have access to tools and resources to achieve language reading success. Is it specific? Yes. But again, we need to kind of be clear about life stages, diversity. an identity, and then what are these specific tools and resources that you're thinking of that need to be clarified? You know, again, it's measurable, but again, I don't know that there is an existing survey to capture this data, so it may need to be a customized survey that needs to be completed. It's achievable, again, if the survey is possible. It's certainly relevant to the success of literacy among the Kansas City citizenry, and it can be time bound. So a 3-year KPI would be by July 1st, 2027, X percentage of diverse Kansas City citizens have access to the tools and resources to achieve language and reading success. So, so I think outcomes 1 and 2, I think, are much big, broad outcomes. Number 3 is much more focused on the coalition itself, establishing a coalition, making the coalition sustainable. So 3 is KC institutions are mobilized to support the vision of KC as a literate city. A is every sector of the community is mobilized in a coordinated action plan and prioritizes support for investment in the vision of KC as a literate city. So is it specific? It is specific, but I think to some points that were made earlier, I think we do need to be clear about, you know, when we talk about every sector of the community, what exactly does that mean? You know, are we talking about, you know, the Latino community, the Black community, you know, Johnson County? I mean, what does that really look like? And then what does mobilize mean? You know, what does it mean to be mobilized? And then I think, you know, I don't remember who said it, but they were really talking about KC as a literate city. I mean, this is the vision, may have been Katina. It was like, you know, we can develop these talking points or this elevator speech, you know, when you're talking with other possible coalition members or stakeholders, you know, to be able to easily communicate, you know, this vision of KC as a literate city, it does need to be packaged in a very articulate and compelling manner, so that you can get the word out and build the coalition and make sure that you aren't leaving people out. And it, I think, starts with your own boards. It starts with your own organizations. I think this is measurable as long as, you know, you define these terms. It is achievable. And then it's certainly relevant, you know, again, it's like, this is the upstream work that needs to happen in order to make outcomes 1 and 2 possible. And, you know, it can be quantified. So by the KPI example or draft is by July 1st, 2027, every sector of the community is mobilized in a coordinated action plan to prioritize support for KC as a literate city. And then the second and final, KPI. Oh, no, second, there's one more. This is one that I think we're well underway with. A structure, basically a coalition, is established and it's sustainable. Play for effective coordination of diverse KC stakeholders to implement the vision of KC as a literate city. So this is just really, frankly, you know, yes, it's specific. You know, we're establishing a sustainable coalition. That's what we've been doing for the last 6 months. It is measurable. I think we can officially say at some point, yes, this coalition is created, we're launched, we're moving forward, we've jumped out of the plane. It feels very achievable. And of course, this is crucial to the success of all of the outcomes, and we can measure it. And I was actually thinking, wow, this could be one that we could say is established within the next few months. But then I was thinking about the sustainability aspect. You know, it's like, how do you define sustainability? I mean, you have enough money to operate? Are you going to hire staff? Establishing, you know, a formal legal structure, you know, incorporate as a 501c3, that kind of thing. So by July 1st, 2027, a coalition representing the diverse Kansas City stakeholders is established and is sustainable to implement this vision of KC as a literate city. And then finally, yeah, I see what I did. Sorry, I just did this, kind of changed some things this morning. So finally, C is literacy advocates align on key concepts and best practices for literacy across the lifespan. Literacy advocates across the city are fully aligned with and feel ownership of the strategic vision for KC as a literate city, including key definitions, best practices, a shared curriculum, coalition action plan, and a data framework. We've just spent the last 30 minutes talking about this. You know, I think shared curriculum to me is programming. That's really, I think, the heart of what we talked about. Is it specific? It is, but I think there are things that clearly need to be further defined, you know, such as ownership of the vision, key definition, best practices, shared curriculum. I mean, all those things just need to make sure that everybody agrees on exactly what that is. And yes, it doesn't seem like it'd be difficult to survey everybody in the coalition to make sure that everybody's aligned. It does seem achievable. It is relevant. Again, this is all part of building this structure upstream to make sure that all of the other outcomes can be established. And of course, it can be done in a time frame. So a sample 3-year key performance indicator by July 1st, 2027. The Literacy Coalition, obviously we need to figure out a name for it, is aligned and has ownership of the strategic vision to make KC a literate city, including adoption of key definition, best practices, shared curriculum, an action plan, and data frameworks. So, I mean, this is big, big stuff, because it's like, this is really how, you know, determining the total and complete success of all the work that you do as individual organizations. And then, of course, how does the coalition achieve the big goals or KPIs as a collective? So I guess it's 10:07, so we're running out of time. Maybe we could pause and just, you know, any reactions to this? Does this seem totally off base? Does this seem like a good start? I think the goal today was just to throw this out and try to get feedback. So I can kind of start with just overall reactions to this. And maybe it was just a lot to throw out.
Well, it is a lot to take in, but thank you for putting it together. It's really helpful to see it laid out that way, and to kind of see where the stretch points are and what things need to be maybe rethought. I will share with you that I interpreted the number 1 piece slightly differently when the words were written, in terms of what realize means. And the way you interpret it means we see it happen. Whereas when we originally had the conversation, and this may just be my misunderstanding, I thought, and partly I thought we were putting it first because it was the foundation of so much else, but that it was part of the awareness campaign, like the stakeholders across Kansas City recognize, maybe is the word I thought we were talking about, that they see a value to this, that they recognize that this actually matters to the outcomes for children and adults. But that could just be me.
Yeah, I interpret that as literal, like
Yeah, it makes sense.
the work
It totally
you're
makes
doing
sense.
would literally decrease houselessness and increase.
Well, and I think it will. But I think, but my conception is that we're starting with, does everybody in Kansas City think it will? Like, is it worth doing? And I think part of that stemmed from our experience with some of the work that Tina's been doing, where, you know, she gets feedback from parents all the time. No, my kids are reading well enough. That's good enough. You know, so that's where my mind was coming from. But also, like, on a bigger picture, thank you. This is really, I find this really helpful.
No, great. I love the feedback, because that's just how I interpreted it. We probably talked about it, but when I looked at it last week, it was like, okay, I'm looking at this like you're really moving the needle, which I think it's possible, but I think you're right. I mean, it totally changes the conversation if it's just we're trying to make sure people understand the value of literacy. So I love other does that sort of strike you all as what you intend here?
I actually interpreted it the same way as you, Tom, because I feel like number 2 is what Kristen is talking about. That's what the awareness campaign, and then knowing where to access and how to navigate resources and things like that. But I almost feel like they're out of order. It's like because
Mm.
of 2, 3, 2 and 3, then 1 could maybe happen. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I would almost put 3 as 1 because it's like
Yeah.
building the coalition is like step 1. Step
Mhm.
2 is probably, yeah, I would totally reverse it. Step 2 is
Mhm.
2, so that wouldn't change, and then this becomes 3. But I think
That
that's
makes sense in terms of my confusion. It's
Yeah.
like, if we're ending with hitting all those long-term
Mhm.
goals, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and I see this as like this is way beyond a 3-year goal. I mean, this
Yeah,
is
that's
like
like a
20,
20-year
50
goal.
year. We won't even be alive, right?
Right.
Talking about planting a tree, right? You plant the seed and we will never benefit from the shade and yeah. Well, so it sounds like Jillian and I saw it the same. Anybody else totally saw it the way Kristen saw it or completely disagree with what Jillian and I thought? And it's okay. This is part of the process.
Yeah.
Disagree. But I actually, if nobody's opposed, I really like the idea of reversing the order and making 3, 1 and 1, 3. If that makes sense.
And I
Anybody
think
disagree?
we put 1 as 1 because we felt like, well, that's what we're doing, you know, like
Mhm.
this is the thing. But I feel like that's the longest term investment or goal or whatever it might be. Whereas the others are a little more within reach, or at least more immediate reach than that one. And they feed
Mhm.
into that first
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, and I agree, Jillian and I guess you and I are on the same page because I saw 2 as very much like the moving the needle as far as awareness, building the just making sure people understand how to access, they're aware of all of the services and programs and the value of literacy, they're empowered. We're definitely reaching to diverse communities. I mean, it sort of seemed like the awareness piece was in 2 for me. Yeah, the other thing, I mean, I think for me, I sat down last week to work on this and I was like, oh, I'm just going to crank this out. I'm going to know exactly what the goals are. But I think what I realized is, we don't really even have agreed upon benchmarks. I mean, it's like to really set KPIs, we need to agree on where we are today, and it's not, and I think I got a chance to look at the chat. I think it was Jatem that said, Mid-America, the MARC has great data. I mean, that might be the place to go for, actually being able to put percentages on, thriving and using, these indicators, public health and educational attainment. I don't know if MARC would capture anything related to awareness of literacy programs. And I mean, does that sound like something that's captured anywhere at this point? Do you think anybody's asking the question about, do people in Kansas City, are they aware of and have access to information about literacy or?
I mean, I think the Royals are doing a bit of that at this point
Oh,
with
yeah.
their PR campaigns and things like that, but they're the only ones that I know of that are thinking along those lines at the
Or
moment.
some of our organizations have asked those questions. I know I specifically have. But even with the Royals, I think they're attempting to raise awareness. I don't think they actually are attempting to measure what people's awareness already is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe that's our work. Maybe that's our work, right?
I think many of us and others doing work related to what we do are working with Urban Education Research Center. And so they may be able to point us toward ways to get at least what is out there. I don't know that
It's the Urban Education Resource Center.
ERC. Yeah, is that right? Yeah.
Huh. I don't know that.
At UMKC.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I know UMKC. Okay. Good to know. Okay, yeah, that'd be a great place to go to maybe see what they have. And again, to me, this is totally achievable. I mean, this is you can capture this data. It's just a question of is it is this stuff that's already being asked? And so yeah, that's good to know that there's a urban ERC, Urban Education Resource Center. Okay.
It's research center.
Oh, research, sorry. Okay. Research, that's even better than resource.
The other
Okay.
thing that I just wanted to throw out there real quick is that there's been a lot of discussion throughout the course of today's conversation about, how do we sell this to our boards? How do we make sure that people are invested? So as far as evaluation is concerned, the one point that I feel like might be missing is measuring or having some indicator that doing this together is more valuable than doing this alone. So how do you measure the collective impact value of working within a coalition rather than in silos or something like that? Because we need that if we want to be able to continue to sell that to our respective organizations and continue the work of a collective. You want to be able to show, well, this is valuable and these are the reasons why. Like we leverage each other's resources and expertise in a way that we couldn't otherwise if we weren't working on this together.
Love it. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling like we're probably out of time to do any breakouts, which is fine. And I love the just group conversation because this is really helpful. Yeah, I felt like the question about just defining, and this kind of fits with what you're saying, Jillian, really clarifying and defining what KC as a literate city is. I mean, that's a beautiful, eloquent vision, but I mean, what does it mean? I mean, how do you articulate to your boards, to the rest of the community, to other potential coalition partners? I mean, I think really getting clear on that is important. Is there any other general feedback?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess just kind of like processing in real time with everyone else, it seems like, we'll be able to have these indicators that we're tracking, but before we're able to really track them, we'll need to do some work to develop a baseline understanding of what data is already being captured, and then develop a data collection method that gets really specific into some of these terms and concepts. So like if we're developing out a survey that would be capturing, would essentially be proxy indicators for all of these things that would point to, everyone, pulling in the same direction on literacy and, that sort of thing, as relates to each outcome. So under each indicator, as we're tracking it over the course of those 3 years, there would be like these data collection tools essentially, and more detailed definitions that would be guiding the data collection process.
So
yeah, I mean, I think
I have
sorry,
one
go ahead.
other thought that's just been sort of rattling around in my brain throughout the course of this whole conversation. I feel like there's maybe a disconnect or a lack of understanding or something, and maybe this is just me, about what will the coalition do? Like on a bottom line, day to day, what will we do to move the needle? Raising awareness, great. May look for best practices, great. But we talk a lot about like systemic issues and a broken system. So what I have heard from, the course of these conversations over the last months is that to some degree, we want to circumvent the system. We want to do something different than the system. And so is that establishing a new best practice for this? And if that's it, then what are we going to do? Like, is it figure out one guinea pig school that we, overwhelm with resources, and in 1 year we look at what happens and then use that as a new best practice? I don't know, but that's the kind of, I feel like people have come to this with such like passion and interesting perspectives and ideas, but I'm still a little unsure of like, okay, after April 1, what will we do? And maybe that is, where the structure of the organization comes in and all of that stuff. Or maybe we break into subcommittees and, 2 of us are working on this and 2 of us are working on this and we come back together. Or maybe we need like a full-on in-person retreat to figure out, nail down, like, okay, what are we going to do post April 1? Because I feel like there's some disconnect there, and I really like these KPIs. I really like, trying to move the needle on a community level. But if we don't have this is how you do it plan to show people, then I don't know where we will get.
Well, I think we talked about the doing, like, right? It is the programming. It's April's point in the chat, but I think it's many different things, right? So one, what data do we already have so that we can ensure we're tracking our progress, right? That's gonna go a ways to ensure that we receive funding and we can be sustainable and do the work. 2, we talked about what makes a high quality program or initiative or whatever. And we as the coalition have the opportunity to come together and set the tone, actually establish what that looks like, and then communicate that as evaluative, right, of any programming that we do collectively or individually, or anybody else that we may be bringing in, right? What are we going to do? We're going to bring additional partners on board to ensure that what we do is broad in scope, and then some of the other barriers that get in the way. Is it housing? Is it transportation? Is it attendance? Is it whatever that impacts the literacy development? Like, boom, are we going to have this discussion about books in the home, to Katie's point earlier? That's the doing, right? What are we doing? How are we doing it? What's going to make it effective? And then, have this plan of action to disseminate the materials, if that's our ultimate goal. So that's the doing of the coalition.
Yeah, and I like love all of that, and I understand all of that. I guess, what's the delivery point and the delivery mechanism? And
I think that's
ongoing. Who are we delivering to?
Right, I think that's ongoing, and it depends on what the thing is that's being delivered. Our audience for that deliverable may
That's what I mean.
Right? But I think that's step by step. That's within the coalition of itself, is as we continue to go. Like, are we going to have that answer come April 1st for everything? No. But that's part of our work as we move forward. So I think, while we are excited and passionate and all of that, and hopefully that stays high, we do also have to be practical and strategic and not bite off more than we can chew. It may be at come April 1st, we say our first plan of action is this, this, and this, right? And this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to measure it. And that's what our capacity allows us to do. But as we bring more funding, more partners, more people, then, okay, now we can address these additional things, and things will be working both in at the same time, right? And all of that. So I think I don't want any of us to get overwhelmed or bogged down in the do yet. Because I think there's still some foundational things that we're working through to get to the do and ensure that we can do the do.
Well, and don't forget, we spent several weeks on methods, which is the organic. And so we've already been working on an action plan that I think is I think maybe more specifically what next steps look like. And so we'll unveil that next week with kind of the really more specific stuff that obviously can get started. And so now I think, Julian, your question is still relevant, like that, and that's part of why we were asking the question of where does programming fit in? Because it really wasn't a big part of the methods. And so I think we do want to make sure that we address that.
Yeah, I'm thinking, sorry. I'm thinking about like, if we're saying a literate city, how do we get a small microcosm of that, right? So like, if we're saying, if like Jillian's saying, our punch is more powerful together, how can we exemplify that within some sector, right, within our community that will then exemplify that? That's what I'm thinking. For me, when I take a pitch to the community, that's what I'm thinking about. It's like, okay, we're saying, yeah, we're better together. And we've tested and tried these different elements out within this subsector. And then we can broaden that out to actually get to an actual literate city. It has to start with something that we can see some of this impact happening in.
And I think kind of to Jillian's point, I mean, we've met for, like we said, a really long time now. And my board's like, so what are you doing? And when I say methods and tactics, methods, you know, they're like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are we moving this? So I understand, I think I get what you're saying, Jillian.
I think that, if, as I hear you, Katina, I believe I'm completely agreeing with you, so correct me if I'm misinterpreting, but I think what we are doing is at this moment less about deliverable programs and more about the clarification and the definition and the plan of action across the areas of defining best practice, of welcoming in the different professional sectors or stakeholders of the city to the conversation, and clarifying or creating the processes through which data will be used to drive every decision as we move forward. And I have concern, I think, and maybe I'm misinterpreting the word programming, but I have concern sometimes in the programming conversation that it might unintentionally drive us toward imagining that there's one silver bullet, there's one program that's going to make this work. And I think what we're going to find is that there's 27 programs that all need to be happening, but they need to be happening really effectively and transparently and in collaboration with others so that they're serving whoever they're serving. Because we need to recognize that solving the problem of literacy isn't solving the same problem for every child out there that can't read. It's a different problem for a lot of different children. And so if we can think more about what we're doing as being like correcting the course of how the city is focused around best practice, around data, and around engagement. I think those three areas, there's probably other areas, but those three areas stand out to me. And maybe that's something that feels a little more concrete for a board or for someone that hasn't been in all these conversations yet. Katina,
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I think that that's more work that needs to be done. I hesitate to say that we are ready to fly without facilitators. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there.
Well, on that note, it's 11:29. Well, no, I'm in California, so it's 12:29 in Kansas City. So yeah, so we appreciate this conversation. This was fantastic. And I think this kind of, for me, brought so much together into one conversation. And I guess I would say to you, we did have the handoff conversation at the beginning, and nobody just jumped forward and said, yes, I'll take this for the month of April, May, June. So we do need to kind of come back to that in terms of, who's got this literally on April 1st. It's a Monday. So but we commit to having a much more detailed action plan that kind of brings the actions and the methods together along with the outcomes. And so I think this is all going to make more sense over the next couple of weeks, and definitely need your feedback on that. But I feel like for me, this was like a big conversation, but I need to go drink some wine since we're in Napa. So I'll see you guys next Monday. All
Thank
right.
you guys so much. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.